อาหารมันไว้ใช้แสดงฐานะทางสังคมไม่ได้ไว้แสดงความรัก
In many ways, the chef and the filmmaker have always been a match made in heaven. One reason is that food offers an easy opportunity to create visually aesthetic, mouth-watering eye candy, and it can be very effectively used to create allegories and symbolic meaning. But it is also because the chef and the filmmaker can relate to each other as kindred spirits. Both are often upheld within our culture as visionary artists and dedicated craftsmen. Both experience similar frustrations in the pursuit of their art, such as dealing with film studios and restaurant owners who hold financial power over them, who exercise influence over their creative vision.
So now suddenly you're going to be an artist. Well, be an artist on your own time.
When everyone recognizes their greatness, it is all worth it. Or is it? Because although it has been a great couple years for chef movies, one theme that I've noticed is that shit got dark. We've had a range of movies and television shows that have taken a more pessimistic approach to the way in which they represent chefs. We had The Menu, a dark comedic satire about a chef's revenge against his entitled guests. We've had Pig, about a retired fine dining chef who now lives alone in the woods, until he has to go on a John Wick-esque revenge quest when his beloved truffle pig gets stolen. And in The Bear, Jeremy Allen plays Carmy, a fine dining chef who has to take over his brother's failing sandwich shop after he commits suicide. And then there is my personal favorite, Boiling Point, an, in my opinion, brilliant one-shot movie where we follow a head chef and his kitchen staff throughout one night at the restaurant on Christmas Eve, trying to deal with the pressures on the busiest night of the year, and things gradually spiral out of control. And then finally, a couple weeks ago, the Thai movie Hunger dropped on Netflix, where we follow a poor noodle shop chef who gets a chance to start cooking for a ruthless fine dining chef. Various critics have placed this particular type of chef movies into the current trend of eat the rich and class warfare media, linking it to shows like The White Lotus and movies such as Triangle of Sadness. Now, particularly The Menu gets classified this way, and although there is certainly some truth to it, I would argue that The Menu is just as much, if not more, about the price of ambition, about the relentless pursuit of greatness and the way we interact with art. Class warfare is, however, front and center in the Thai movie Hunger. An important reason food is such an apt allegory to expose the tensions between the affluent and poor is because, contrary to other art forms, food is a primary necessity. In Hunger, Chef John Paul explains that the poor eat to end their hunger, but when you have more than enough to eat, your hunger never ends. Your hunger for approval, for social status, for something special, for exclusive experiences, that is a hunger that can never be satisfied, and it is this dichotomy between food as a basic necessity and as a luxury status symbol that makes it such a potent allegory about wealth inequality. As Hannah Collins writes in her review on The Menu and The Bear, food at its most basic level is sustenance to keep us alive. Food culture therefore turns a basic necessity into high art, with a high inflated value attached. The reality is that the cost of fine dining is hard to justify. Of course, arguments can be made about innovation, experimentation, and the deconstruction of ingredients, and new and original ways to look at food, nature, and the fundamentals of the universe.
Some people idolize, athletes and musicians and painters and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those people are idiots. What they do, it doesn't matter. They play with inflatable balls and ukuleles and shit. Chefs, they play with the raw materials of life itself.
But just as often, it is probably about vanity, status, and access to something exclusive.
They're not real. You get that, right? None of it is real. The critics aren't real. The customers aren't real. Because this isn't real. You aren't real.
Of course, we must also place this wave of chef movies and eat the rich cinema within the context of the happening of 2020, as it massively increased the wealth gap between rich and poor, as the world's 10 richest billionaires doubled their wealth from 700 billion to 1.5 trillion, as the incomes of 99% of humanity fell and 160 million people were forced into poverty. Of course, during this period, the restaurant and hospitality industry was hit incredibly hard, with even after the lockdowns easing, many staffers refusing to return to its low wages, hard working conditions, and ungrateful customers. In The Menu, the chef started cooking out of love and passion, but got sour over time as he climbed the ranks of his profession. But in the movie Hunger, the chef explains that he never started cooking out of love or a passion for the craft. Cooking has nothing to do with love, it is about status. When he was a little kid, his mother worked as a living-in maid for a wealthy family. He saw all the things that the rich had access to and he had not. So one day he saw caviar in the fridge and wanted to try it, got branded a thief, and his poor mother had to work for months to pay it off. And he was also made to clean it up. And when he then finally tasted it, a tiny spoon of fish eggs that cost him and his mom so much, both literally and figuratively, he discovered it tasted like shit. And it is from this mindset that he vowed to become a chef, not out of love, but to have rich people pay back for his food, to be hungry for him. Throughout the movie, every meal he cooks is also an ever so subtle condemnation of the rich people he cooks for. Cooking food, in his eyes, has nothing to do with love. It is all about status, prestige, and the wealth that comes with it. Of course, in the menu, Chef Slowik did once cook out of love, but the relentless, obsessive pursuit to reach the highest echelons of his profession has destroyed that love, and it turns out that achieving everything he ever wanted ultimately was a hollow victory that cost him everything. And that is the second question this new wave of chef movies is asking, and the same question that Damien Chazelle has been asking as well in his filmography. Is sacrificing everything in your life in the pursuit of your dream actually worth it? Or will it break things in your life and in yourself that are not worth breaking? Is the price too high to pay? This is of course a complicated matter. I would never want to dissuade anyone from pursuing their passions and ambitions. I'm doing so myself. But with regards to the restaurant business, we do know it is especially brutal. Working your way up as a chef takes years of incredibly hard work on minimum wage. As Alice Woodhouse writes about this wave of cinema in The New Statesman, they show the relentlessness of the profession, grueling and unsafe working hours, low pay, wage theft, and abuse of all kinds. Carmi and the Bear and Andy in Boiling Point battle substance addiction, which 27% of chefs have experienced. The reality is, as Boiling Point so fantastically shows, that even in a relatively non-toxic work environment, running a restaurant is an incredibly tough challenge. The margins are thin, the pressure is high, and there are so many simultaneously moving and conflicting parts that it is almost impossible to not become overwhelmed, especially when things go wrong. And we so often forget, when it comes to food, things can really go wrong. As we know, the failure rate of new restaurants is around 80% within the first 5 years. Because running a kitchen is so hard, it is no surprise that in the world of fine dining, where everything has to be absolutely perfect, they are run with military discipline and the chef as a dictator. Of course, this also breeds grueling work hours, abuse and exploitation, both emotional and physical. We might think of these violent work environments as Hollywood dramatizations or reality TV spectacle, but although certainly not every kitchen, countless people in all different roles in restaurants are confirming that some of these depictions are eerily accurate. One interesting example is that of Chef René Redzepi, head chef of Noma, 5 times best restaurant in the world, which recently closed its doors. In an open letter, he writes about the culture in the kitchen and his own experience of turning into the toxic, abusive chef. As he writes, "I started cooking in a time when it was common to see my fellow cooks get slapped across the face for making simple mistakes, to see plates fly across a room, crashing into someone who was doing his job too slowly. It wasn't uncommon for me to be called a wordless cunt or worse. It wasn't uncommon to reach for a pan only to find that someone had stuck the handles in the fire and then put it back on my station just to mess with me." And he promised himself he would never be that way, but once he had his own restaurant with his own money invested and the weight of all the expectations of the world on his shoulders, he slowly started turning into exactly what he did not want to become. As he writes, "The smallest transgression sent me into an absolute rage. Why the hell have you not picked the time correctly? Why have you overcooked the fish? What is wrong with you? Suddenly I was going crazy about someone's workstation being dirty or some small thing that they said wrong. This was how I had been taught to cook, and it was the only way I knew to get a message through. I can't say that it didn't work for a time. Noma has succeeded beyond whatever I could have imagined for it, but I've been a bully for a large part of my career. I've yelled and pushed people. I've been a terrible boss at times." He specifically describes when he completely lost his shit at a Colombian girl he liked who did not follow his instructions. Quote, "I went completely crazy. I pulled her out of service and I screamed at her, 'What the fuck are you doing? Go home.' It was a really bad moment. I tried calling her to apologize, but even after we'd spoken, I could feel that the air still wasn't clear. I felt horrible for being so cruel to a person." And this is why it is such an important question these movies and TV shows are asking. Is reaching the pinnacle of one's profession worth it, whether that is becoming a Hollywood star, a great jazz musician, or running the best restaurant in the world? To what extent is it worth the destruction of your physical and mental health, you becoming a selfish, cruel, and entitled person, forced to engage with other selfish, cruel, and entitled people?
แต่ใจเย็นนะนี่แค่จุดเริ่มต้นจากนี้ไปคุณยังต้องเสียอะไรอีกเยอะนี่แหละรสชาติของการเป็นคนพิเศษ
There is no easy answer to this. We often celebrate those who sacrifice a lot in the pursuit of greatness, and more often than not rightfully so. On the other hand, plenty of people only realize that these sacrifices were not actually worth it, only when it is too late. Yet finding the right balance might also be an incredibly difficult task. Noma chef Rene Redzepi vowed to create a more balanced, sustainable and fair working environment, only to realize that that is not sustainable. Noma is closing. As Joe Ray writes on Wired.com, for years high-end kitchens like Noma have relied on unpaid and incredibly underpaid internships, where stagiaires worked grueling, life-sucking hours as they learned the trade. This is often illegal and it is slowly petering out, yet for interns and staff who grind it out at a place like Noma, the experience can write the ticket for the rest of their careers. And as it turns out, at least right now, running a fine dining restaurant in any other way is not doable. Now, I don't know what the future of fine dining looks like, as my culinary expertise has never developed far beyond my go-to student meal of pasta chicken pesto. I will say that although this wave of dark chef movies is a logical reflection of the place our society currently finds itself in, where food and the people who cook and eat it are allegories for class tensions, wealth inequality, entitlement, anger, self-loathing and self-destruction, this too will pass, and that we should remember, even though it sounds corny, that food and cooking for others at its very best is an expression of love. The dinner table can bring people together. It is one of the places from where intimate relationships grow and bloom. Food can transform us and bring back memories and take our breath away. Cooking at a professional level takes a lot, but as the menu screenwriter Seth Rees said in an interview with Bon Appetit, the chef and the staff, they want to make the customers happy. So as customers, what we can do is to approach any occasions where people are kind enough to cook for us, whether that is a personal or professional setting, whether the meal costs a couple bucks or is a high-end experience, to approach it not with entitlement and overinflated egos and expectations, but with kindness, enthusiasm and appreciation. Thank you all for watching.